Hello, I'm David Morris and welcome to Risk, episode 4. And if you've just joined us, it's perfect timing because today I'm going to read from the very beginning of chapter 1 of my book, A New Era of Risk. And this chapter, I'll jump straight into it. This chapter is called Why We Need a New Sustainable Internationalism. We need a whole new approach to the international business environment and the international relations system because of the seismic shifts that are occurring right now in the 2020s. So here we go. The sky is changing. We appear to be in a perfect storm of seismic shifts in the international order, in geopolitics and in the world economy, at the same time as transformational changes in technology and, of course, an unfolding climate crisis. China is at the centre of each of these major challenges. In those parts of the world that are beginning to frame China as a rival, there is a deep pessimism about a return to a bipolar world order. But given the uncertainties about the new risks, are there alternative strategies to confrontation and conflict? How we frame and respond to world challenges changes with each generation, and indeed today's certainties and strategies may look quite different when we look back in another decade or two. When the Cold War ended, optimism took hold in many parts of the world. No longer were we gripped by the existential threat of two rival powers clashing. No longer was the world divided between two rival economic systems. It appeared for a short time that the growth promise from globalization might offer an unprecedented opportunity for a rising tide to lift all boats. It even seemed possible that diverse nations, large and small, with different cultures, politics and economics, might find common ground in tackling new global challenges, from peacekeeping to climate change. That a great new project of sustainable development could replace the old great game of geopolitics and geopolitical contest. In the 1990s to 2010s, hundreds of millions of people were lifted from poverty and life opportunities transformed, especially in Asia. So it all seemed to be going very well for most people in the world, this increasing interdependence, this globalization process. But it wasn't going so well for some in the US and in Europe, and I'll come back to that later. In the 2020s, we're in a great retreat into pessimism, fear and blame, fueled by the old tricks of populism and ethno-nationalism that have traditionally foreshadowed conflict and the destruction of civilized societies everywhere. Cultures, politics and economics are imagined to be zero-sum again, pitting nations and communities against each other. The international system is splintering, and confrontation is replacing cooperation as the new normal. We appear to be hurtling towards a new Cold War or worse. Cynics claim all of this is inevitable, that big powers will inevitably clash, that there is only room on the mountain for one tiger, yet the world is a smaller place than ever, and there is an increasing number of tigers. Might humans, as opposed to tigers, generate the intelligence to avoid falling back into the trap of conflict? Might we develop strategies for shared success rather than beggar thy neighbour, which is a recipe for failure? Could we forget the pessimism of the present as quickly as we seem to have forgotten the promise of the post-Cold War world? With the rise of China and India, Indonesia and other emerging economies in what used to be called the developing world, these questions hinge on whether diversity can coexist in competition without conflict. Given the uncertainty and complexity of changes underway in the international system, are there scenarios in which a new interdependence can be made sustainable? Can a multipolar world be made to work? There are deeply unfashionable questions here to be asked, but they need to be asked regardless. By definition, a sustainable internationalism would mean an approach to international relations that does not collapse into conflict, that would provide the basis for realist competition between nations, but also necessary international cooperation against collective challenges such as climate change. A new sustainable internationalism would need to tolerate and indeed be committed to diversity rather than an idealist expectation that one worldview can prevail over all others. Indeed, instead of a chauvinistic view that one worldview should prevail. It might require a new realism based on evidence rather than grand theory that imagines the world's vast complexity can be reduced to a chessboard of black and white. That means a shift in mindset. It may yet require new institutions, new rules, new norms, all of which will be very threatening to vested interests. The future role of China in the world is one of the central questions upon which many other important global questions depend. As a starkly different political, economic and social system from the status quo powers, does China's rise signal inevitable confrontation and conflict, or can diverse nations find a sustainable way forward that is interdependent with China? What are the risks? How can they be managed? What are the opportunities? What are our mindset obstacles that might need to be tackled to devise alternatives to disaster? What follows in this book and in the future episodes as I read the book, what follows is my earnest attempt to consider as objectively as possible these questions of how we strategically manage interdependence with China in the future. No human has yet been able to accurately predict the future. So rather than pretend to have the answers, this is an attempt to identify likely risks and likely opportunities and to map out some possible scenarios by examining the evidence in some representative case studies. Hopefully, this exploration is of value to decision makers and to those who find themselves willingly or unwillingly interdependent with China and who are looking for ways to manage the risks ahead. China, for its part, is busy preparing to manage its own risks, developing new forms of interdependence with the developing world, constructing new trans-regional institutions, platforms and projects. Its Belt and Road Initiative is one overarching geo-economic framework that ambitiously seeks to shape the international environment. Chinese leaders represent their international activism as a contribution to global governance and development, simultaneously pursuing the interests of China as a rising power, as well as win-win outcomes for their partners. The response of the US and some of the US allies to China's new interdependence projects, however, has been to adopt a new geopolitical competition, suspicious of China's international actions as destabilising to world order. Yet how the world adapts to a rising China, and indeed how a rising China will act, remain uncertain. We're in the early stages of this change in world order, and there are many scenarios for how we might navigate the years ahead. In recent years, there's been a premium on zero-sum, binary geopolitical thinking that tends to catastrophize risks, constructing each point of connectivity with China as a security threat. The geopolitical contest is degenerating rapidly. Meanwhile, positive-sum, geo-economic interdependence thinking that was the hallmark of the globalization era since the end of the Cold War is increasingly rejected as having underestimated risks and creating vulnerabilities. The new narrative emanating from traditional powers depicts even Chinese electric vehicles and solar panels as threats. Both of these simplistic geopolitical and the geoeconomic approaches taken by commentators and scholars alike create paradoxes for actors in the real world. Most of us, whether we're individuals, whether they're businesses, whether we're governments, most of us are seeking to benefit from and manage risks and opportunities of interdependence with both China and the US. We therefore need grounded understanding of what is going on, developed from a close investigation of dynamics across the diversity of China's points of connectivity with the international system. For this reason, the chapters and the episodes that will follow take what I call a political risk approach to examining the evidence rather than the more common normative approach that all things emanating from China are either good or bad. The research that was undertaken for this book was rooted in empirical observation by a wide range of actors and stakeholders of processes underway during a period of transformation in the international system and their own assessments of risks and opportunities. I interviewed 100 people or more for this research. Because of the high level of uncertainty in this evolving international system. And instead of relying on assumptions that one side will generate all the risks, a normatively sceptical framework is developed in this work that we'll read from to assess risks and opportunities. So that's my introduction to Chapter 1, and in the next episode I'll continue reading from Chapter 1 about the political risk approach to a more objective, hopefully a more realist approach to managing risks.